Hello and welcome. My name is Meepolis, they, he, she. And today we are looking at and talking about Hellblazer, Original Sins, first of 5 collected volumes of Hellblazer, written primarily by Jamie Delano. This collected volume includes issues 1 to 9 of John Constantine Hellblazer, as well as issues 76 and 77 of Swamp Thing. All of these issues were originally published across 1988 and collected here in 1997 by DC's Vertigo. This is my third attempt at reading and reviewing this volume since I started this channel back in 2016 or so. Recommended for, quote, mature readers. Content notes include infestation of insects, racial caricatures, demons and hell, Christian fascists, child brides, Vietnam War, civilian deaths, sex, nudity, body horror, smoking, sexual assault, and references to people having AIDS, and Constantine being poisoned psychically and having it compared to AIDS. Diving a bit deeper into the creative team across these issues, we of course have writer Jamie Delano, who wrote everything in here except for the 17th issue of Swamp Thing, by Rick Veitch. According to his website, Delano has written comics and novels. He, quote, lives with his partner, Sue. They have 3 adult children and 5 grandchildren. And according to the Hellblazer wiki, he was handpicked by Alan Moore, who created Constantine in his run on Swamp Thing to launch the character's standalone series. Clicking over to Wikipedia, besides the previously highlighted John Ridgway, art was also done by Brett Ewins, 1955 to 2015, quote, a British comic book artist best known for his work on Judge Dredd and Rogue Trapper, end quote. Jim McCarthy is, quote, a British comics creator. He became well known for his work on Bad Company in 2000 AD before going on to write a number of graphic novels based on musicians, as well as becoming a music journalist. He is the brother of co-writer of Mad Max Fury Road, Brendan McCarthy. End quote. Conversely, Tom Mandrake is, quote, an American comics artist, perhaps best known for his collaborations with writer John Ostrander on several series, including Grimjack and Firestorm, The Spectre, and Martin Manhunter from DC Comics, end quote. Colorist Lovern Kindzierski would go on to become the vice president and creative director of Digital Chameleon, a comic book coloring and inking studio based out of Winnipeg, Canada from 1991 to 2003. And letterer Annie Halfacree, now known as Parkhouse, quote, has been one of the leading letterers in British comics for over 30 years. End quote. And the following are the videos you can check out for each of the creators I've already talked about. Sandman Volume 2 highlights John Costanza. Sandman, a combined review of Volumes 8, 9, and 10 highlights John Ridgway. And The Swamp Thing combined review of Volumes 1 and 2 highlights Rick Veitch, Tatjana Wood, Alfredo Alcala, and Todd Klein. Keywords that came to mind include poverty, corruption, demons, antihero, British, and death. Clicking over to Comic Find, the issue-by-issue summaries are an average of 5 paragraphs each, so I'll try and summarize further, but warning for heavy spoilers and just highlighting the points that particularly struck me. First off, we have the story arc that ran from issue 1 to 2, titled Hunger and a Feast of Friends, where we open on a series of individuals who just can't stop eating. Then we jump to Constantine arriving home to find his flat infested by bugs, and an acquaintance/uninvited houseguest, Gary, who is also going through withdrawal. Seeing as some of my goals in life include not stigmatizing people who use drugs, are not white, or do things outside of Christianity, this story has always left me feeling a bit uneasy. On the plus side, we do ultimately learn all the ways in which Gary is a shithead that are not related to his use of heroin. On the negative side, black people are depicted as primitive/exotic slavers of children, or running around in voodoo gangs who organize fights between zombies. Then we have the relatively standalone third issue entitled Going For It, in which we get some pretty blatant Margaret Thatcher is a demon vibes, wherein John manages to thwart demon yuppie gentrifiers, at least temporarily. This issue had previously been my favorite in this collection, and it manages to easily keep that title. Issue 4, Waiting for the Man, is another standalone plot-wise, but does introduce us to a group that pops up throughout the rest of this collection, namely the Christian fascist group, the Resurrection Crusade. And while I wish this was not the case, this issue felt it has only become more relevant and timely than it felt during previous read-throughs. TLDR, John's sister and husband get caught up in the cult resurrection crusade, and as a result, they take away all their daughter's pop culture and move the family to a place where Gemma is extremely isolated and lonely, leaving her vulnerable to abduction by basically all parents' worst nightmares combined, and a hint of things to come. Evil incarnate in this case is apparently associated with the group Damnation Army. While not a one-for-one, the reason I note this story as feeling more timely is because of my home country's ongoing struggles with eradicating child marriage. Did you know that it wasn't until 2018 that, quote, Delaware and New Jersey became the first states to outlaw marriage for anyone under the age of 18 with no exceptions, says UNICEF USA, with 86% of these minors, 87% of those being girls, married to adults rather than fellow minors, according to data that was collected from 2000 to 2015 and analyzed by Frontline. Circling back to the comic at hand, though, we've started to get into a more obvious role plot-wise. Issue 5, when Johnny comes marching home, could have been a critique of the meat grinder, which is the industrial military machine of the USA, that I appreciated. But once again, non-white characters are caricatures for violence to be enacted upon. So no points. Then we have issue 6, Extreme Prejudice, which kicks off with some fascist skinheads looking to gay bash and instead getting eaten up by the Damnation Army, while John has heterosexual sex. After some investigating, a friend of John, Raymond, confides in John that he is dying of AIDS. Issue 7, Ghost in the Machine, we open with John using a contact who works at a Weetabix factory to investigate the Resurrection Crusade, and Raymond hangs out with John's mysterious lady love, Zed. Of course, the arm of the Resurrection Crusade, known as the Tongues of Fire, plus Zed's father, managed to kidnap Zed and beat Raymond to death for his sins. John's Weetabix friend's body burns up, leaving his soul caught up in the Weetabix computer system he was using to investigate the Resurrection Crusade, leaving Zed and John separated physically but both feeling guilty about how all their friends are ending up dead. Issue 8, Intensive Care, felt like it included the most feminine-looking Constantine, as he recalls being restrained and tortured by demons in a hospital. I was kind of surprised that this involved the same creative team as the rest of the volume. Elsewhere, Zed has been completely brainwashed and renamed Mary, as she is prepared for her, quote, destiny of giving birth to a god. And finally, the last true Hellblazer content for this volume is issue 9, called Shot to Hell, in which Raymond's ghost haunts John and says that the infusion of demon blood he received in the last episode is a psychic poisoning, and some comparison is made to AIDS. Stuff happens, and then John manages to have sex with Zed again, believing that his tainted blood will make her undesirable to the Resurrection Crusade. Of course, without her consent. Then the Swamp Thing appears, and we transition to Swamp Thing issue 76, which just comes across as really not my fetish of choice. TLDR, Swamp Thing possesses the body of Constantine to have super heterosexual sex with Abby Holland after verbally noting he knows she is ovulating in order to conceive Teffa Holland, I guess. This despite the fact that Abby apparently really dislikes John. Fun! Please note sarcasm. Swamp Thing issue 77 continues this unfortunate plotline with a two people who hate each other and only one hotel bed to sleep in gag. I can't imagine why I had completely forgotten about this final plotline. Looking at the art, I'm always a little bit surprised that not everyone loves the dark line-filled style of this era of horror comics. The color choice isn't super realistic, but it was pretty expressive. Page layouts leaned heavily into the novel, with a couple of them being pretty confusing even for me. So wrapping up these feelings for now, it's a lot. As I generally say with these comics that were published when I was but a babe, I can't speak to how this would have hit at original publication, so my focus is on talking about how these comics hit me now. Gender has been pretty binary, with women being fairly disempowered at best and pretty bitchy at worst. Looking at you, Swamp Thing issue 76, not everyone is perfectly able-bodied or straight, and a lot of people are living in poverty, but I'm not really sure if the inclusion is all that positive. Racial diversity is obviously used in some of the worst ways possible. Thinking about this read in comparison to my Vertigo read through overall, many of the parts I didn't like hit the same as the Swamp Thing and Sandman comics I've been reading that were published before and basically at the same time, respectively. Only with perhaps the edgy factor turned up a few notches, although I am less familiar with what Jamie Delano is up to these days compared to Alan Moore and Neil Gaiman, which as far as I've observed does have a pretty considerable impact on how people feel now about their work in the 1900s. I would describe this read-through of Vertigo as more for research purposes than entertainment ones, so my talking about them is not to say I recommend them, particularly in this case. The more I dig in, the more I really want to push back against the idea that any comic or graphic novel is a must-read. And while certain comics and graphic novels might jump the medium forward, there's always someone else coming up from behind and building on top of it and improving it. Comics may be one of the few things in life that I feel like is consistently getting better and better. That said, bye y'all, keep reading, and organized and capitalist oppression. And as always, Literally Graphic is created on land that should be given back to the traditional landholders, which in this case is, to my knowledge, the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, non-Anishinaabe people, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Huron-Wendat Nation.